using Windows to launch a new Solana NFT collection using Metaplex Candy Machine V2. Hey everyone, this is Keystrokes. Welcome back to the channel. In this video, we'll talk about how you can launch your own NFT collection using Metaplex Candy Machine V2 and focus on how to use Windows to do all of this. So let's quickly review everything that we have done so far. We started with learning what Metaplex and Candy Machine was, and we launched a Solana NFT collection using the minimal configuration required. Then we went to the next step and learned how to launch a whitelist and public mint. And then finally, we learned how we can mint with Reveal. But I noticed a common problem, and I really want to thank my viewers for bringing this up. All the problems had one thing in common, which was Windows. People complained about all kinds of errors that they faced, and I was like, I have no idea what's going on because I don't have a Windows machine. And as more and more people raised this concern, I felt it's important to create a video on how to do all of this on Windows, and here we are. So overall, I found there are two problems with this. The first problem is that Windows doesn't know the home directory symbol, and every time you'd run a command that involves this home directory symbol, it would treat it as a new directory, and that just didn't work. On Unix systems, it points to your home directory. Like on each computer, you can have multiple user accounts, and there's a home directory for each user account, which is represented by this symbol called as tilde. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And Windows just doesn't recognize it. And the second problem that I noticed was that terminals do not support the backward slash. Backward slash is just a way to break a command into multiple lines. Let's say if you have a very long command, then it's good to break it into multiple lines just because it helps with readability. But many terminals just don't support that. So in this video, I'll go through the whole process of creating a candy machine on Windows, and hopefully our Windows developers won't face as much problems as they have been facing. I've spun up a virtual machine which I'm going to use for all of this, and that virtual machine is very slow for me, so apologies in advance in case things aren't as smooth as you'd expect it to be. Okay, so let's see everything that we'll cover. We'll be using PowerShell on Windows to execute all of our commands. We'll be using VS Code for all of our editing like we did previously, and we'll use the PowerShell in VS Code itself. You can use any editor you want, but you might just need to know things like what's the alternative of using a backward slash if you want to break the commands down. Once you know those things, you can use whatever editor you want. Then we'll create a Solana NFT collection on DevNet, and then we'll do an example NFT mint using the Candy Machine UI. Let's also talk about what we won't cover in this video. We won't be going over basic details like what is Metaplex, what's Candy Machine, and all the various setup that we have already seen in our previous videos. So if you want to learn more about the basics, I'll suggest watching these videos to get a hang of the basic details about Metaplex, Candy Machine, and how you can use the different configurations to launch a whitelist mint and implement a reveal mint. Okay, so now let's launch a collection on Solana using Windows. And if this is your first time watching a Solana NFT collection video, then let's just go over the steps of everything that's involved here. Now, this might seem a lot of steps, but as usual, it's not. They're just broken down into very small steps so that we can easily consume them. So we'll start by setting up Metaplex, then we'll configure our mint and the NFT collection. We'll use the most minimal configuration so that our focus is to launch a NFT collection on Windows. Then we'll prepare our assets, which are your NFT images and the corresponding configuration. Then we'll verify those configuration to make sure they look good and they are ready to be uploaded. And then in the next step, we'll actually upload the assets and create our candy machine. Then we'll do one final verification to make sure it's ready for minting. And then we'll perform our mint. And then we'll be done. And throughout the video, we'll be following the Metaplex documentation that you can see on your screen. And I'll just gear the command so that it can run on Windows. Okay, so let's do the first step and let's set up Metaplex. Okay, so here is the Metaplex Candy Machine documentation. And the first step is to install all the toolings that we need. Here it mentions 4 different tools that we need at minimum, which is Git, Node, Yarn, and TS Node. I'll recommend going to each of these links and following the instruction for Windows to install them. I already have these toolings installed, so I'm going to run these commands to make sure that they actually work. So starting with Git, let's copy this command and go to our editor, which is VS Code here, and I'll open up a terminal. and we can see that it created a PowerShell terminal for us. So running the first command, which is git version, we see that it's recognized and it's good. So now let's run the next command, which is the node version. Copying the command and pasting it here. Okay, this is recognized as well. Then the next one is yarn. Copying the command and pasting it here, and we see that it's recognized as well. Then moving on to the next one, which is TS node. Copying it and pasting it right here. And this works as well. So these were the 4 toolings that I mentioned here on the top. Now if we scroll down, we can skip all of this for now and go further down and install Solana tool suite. Please note, when you install the Solana tool suite, you have to use command prompt with admin permissions. But I already have this installed, so I'm going to skip this step. So let's run this command, which is Solana version, and make sure it's recognized and it works. Sometimes after installing the tool, you might want to restart your whole VS Code, because I have faced issues where after installing something, the command wasn't recognized. And I'd suggest shutting down VS Code, installing all the tools, and then coming back. Okay, now that this is done, I want to show you the folder setup that I have. I have created a NFT folder on my desktop here, and this is where I am here in my terminal. You can see it's C users, IE user, which is the default user I got with this VirtualBox machine, and then on desktop and NFT. And right now there's nothing in there, it's empty. So our first step will be to check out Metaplex. And for that we can scroll up here and we can see a command which is listed under clone and install Metaplex. So let's copy this command, and we won't paste it into a terminal yet. Let's create a new file where I'll make note of all the commands that I'm running. So I'll maybe name it as command.txt, and I'll paste the command which we just copied. Now if you remember, this tilde symbol is not recognized by Windows. So we will replace this by a period, which means the current directory. So now when we run this command, it will check out Metaplex in the current directory, which will be the NFT directory. So now let's copy this command and paste it into a terminal and hit enter. Perfect. Now you can see we have a new Metaplex directory here, which was created because we cloned this repository into our current directory in the Metaplex folder. Okay, now the next step is to run this command, which installs all the dependencies which this package needs. And before we paste the command, again, let's first paste it in our text document here and replace the tilde with period, which is the current directory again. Let's copy this command and run it here. Now this can take some time. Okay, so now that the dependencies are installed, let's look at the next step, which is to verify that the Metaplex was set up properly. So let's copy this command into our editor here and replace the home directory symbol with a period again. And let's run this command. And let's run this command now. Okay, and this is what we expected. We got the version that we asked for the Candy Machine V2 CLI. So let's go back to our documentation and let's run the next step, which is to create our Solana wallets. So if we scroll down further, we'll see there's a section called setting up a DevNet wallet for testing. So let's copy this command and paste it in our text editor again. So in this case, it's creating a wallet named devnet.json in the home directory. Again, we'll replace this to be our current directory, and we'll change the path here to be a folder called, let's say, wallet. Okay, let's copy this command and run this. We'll skip the passphrase and our wallet is created. Here's the public key, which I'll copy into a text editor just for reference. Okay, and here we can see we have a new wallet folder created with devnet.json. Now the next step is to configure our Solana CLI to use this wallet. So let's copy this command right here, paste it here. Now here we need to replace this path with the actual wallet path that we created in the previous step. To do that, we can just copy this and paste it down here. Now another thing that I like to do here is replace this with the absolute path. Right now it's a relative path. If you don't know what a relative path means, I'll try to quickly talk about it. A relative path basically is a path relative to your current directory, as the name says. Like in this case, we are saying from the current directory, we'll go to wallet and then devnet.json. But I would like to have absolute path, which is the complete path for a given file. So in this case, let's see what our current directory is. For that, we can run pwd and we'll copy this path. We'll replace the current directory with the output we got here and convert all of these backward slashes into a forward slash. I know this seems very tricky, but all in all, you just have to replace the backward slashes with forward slash. Windows uses backward slashes everywhere, but PowerShell recognizes forward slash, and that's what's used in Unix systems, and that's what you'll see in the documentation. So we're just trying to keep things consistent. Okay, now let's run this command. And we can see that the key pair path is now set to this whole absolute path that we set. Now the reason we set this to an absolute path and not a relative path is because if you change the directory where you're running this command, then the key pair might not be found because it will try to find the key pair relative to the directory you are in. So it's good to give the exact path, the whole absolute path for the key pair, so you can run your command from anywhere you'd like and your key pair will still be found. Okay, then the final step is to configure our Solana CLI to use devnet. For that, we'll just copy the command from the documentation, and luckily we don't have to make any modifications here. We can just run it in our terminal. Okay, that's done. Now if you want to make sure that everything is good, you can run solana config get and you'll get the same output that you're already seeing here, but it's a good way to just verify that everything is good. So our RPC URL is set to Metaplex devnet, which looks good, and our key pair is set to the devnet.json, which we previously created. Now we have a wallet, but we don't have any balance in there, and that's what the next step here is in the Metaplex documentation. We'll request for an airdrop of 2 Solana using this command. I'll just make a record of this command in our text file and run this command now. It's requesting for 2 Sol, and please remember it's devnet, so it's not real money. I wish it was, but for testing, we can ask for as much Solana as we want. Now if we run Solana balance, we'll see that it tells us 2 Sol as our balance. I'll make a note of this command as well. Okay, so this was all that was required to set up our wallet, Metaplex, and configure the Solana CLI. Next, we'll configure our mint and the NFT collection now. Okay, so now let's create our configuration file for our Candy Machine. For that, we'll create a new file at the NFT folder level. So let's hit this plus symbol and name it as config.json. And now going back to the documentation, in the configuration tab, if you scroll down, Metaplex gives a very minimal configuration that we can use for our Candy Machine, which is right here. Okay, I'll copy this and paste it into config.json here. Let's just go over it very quickly. So for price, we'll change this to maybe 0.1 Sol just to keep things cheap. For number of NFTs, let's make it 2 because we don't need a large collection right now. For Sol treasury account, we'll just put the public key that we created for our wallet. So let's go back to our commands. We made a note of the public key here and let's put it in here. And if you need more description about what each of these settings are, please refer to my previous video. If I cover it here right now, it will just take a lot of time. I will ignore the next 2 settings. Go live date is when the mint will go live. It's set in the past, so we don't have to worry about it. And I think we can leave the rest of it as it is. So let's save this file. Okay, so this is all that was required to configure our Candy Machine. Great, now let's prepare our assets, which are your NFT images and the corresponding configuration files. Now going back to the documentation, they provide a sample collection that we'll be using. If you scroll down in preparing your assets section, you can see they provide a sample collection, which is right here. It says you can download the complete sample collection for testing and experimentation. So let me quickly download this and I'll be right back. Okay, so I just downloaded the sample collection and it's right here. I renamed it to assets and it comes with 10 NFT images. Now for our test, we only want 2 NFTs. So we'll just keep 0 and 1 and delete everything else. So we'll keep the top 4 files here. So let's select all of this and delete them. Okay, and now they're all in the recycle bin and we are left with 2 assets here, 1 image the corresponding config file, another image, and the corresponding configuration file. Let's look at the first configuration file. I think everything looks good. All we need to update is this creators with our own public key here, and we'll use the same public key that we created before. So we'll copy this and paste it in 0.json, which is our first NFT image. We'll save it, and now we'll open our 1.json, which is the configuration for the second NFT image, and do the same here. Okay, this looks good now. So our assets are ready, and they're inside the assets folder, and the configuration file for each of the NFT has been updated as well. Now, before we upload, let's just verify that our configuration and the assets, they're fine. If we go back to our documentation, there's a section called verifying assets. And if we scroll down, it tells us to run this command. So let's copy this command into our editor here. And as usual, we'll change the home directory to the current directory. And then this already looks good. And we'll run this command now. Okay, so our assets are now verified and everything looks good. Let's upload our assets, create our candy machine, and finally verify everything. And this is the last step before we go to mint. Now the next step is to actually create the candy machine. So going back to our documentation, under the creating the candy machine section, if we scroll down, we can see this is the command that we have to run to upload our assets and create the candy machine. So let's copy this command and go back to our editor and make some changes to it so that it works on Windows and on PowerShell. So first changing the home directory to current directory, then changing this key pair to point to our key pair that we created, which is right here. Okay, replacing this looks good. This is the configuration file, and we'll remove this because it's just a prefix for different file naming convention that we won't be using. And now we'll be tackling the second problem. PowerShell does not know the backward slash. Instead, it relies on the backtick to support this feature. So we'll replace all the backward slashes in the end of the commands here with a backtick. So replacing this with a backtick, and the next line right here. Now if you're using some other terminal like git bash, then maybe the backward slash would work, but for PowerShell, it needs these backticks. Now let's try to run this command and hopefully things will work. This is the step where most of the people have faced issues on Windows. Okay, fingers crossed. And our candy machine is now created. So before we move forward, let's scroll up in the output here and copy the candy machine address just for our records. Okay, I'll make a note of it in our text editor and save it. Okay, so this is all that was required to create our candy machine, and the backticks actually worked. Now before we proceed, let's make sure that everything is actually good. And for that, we'll refer to the verify upload section of the documentation. Here we can see we have a command which just verifies that the files have been uploaded properly and our candy machine can actually be used for minting. So copying this command into our editor again, and we'll do the same exercise like we did with the previous command to create the candy machine. So step 1 is to replace the home directory with the current directory. Then we'll remove this prefix here. Now because this is the last line in the command, we don't need this backward slash anymore because that's the last line in the command. And then we'll replace all the backward slashes with the backtick because that's what's used to break the lines into multiple lines for PowerShell. And one final change is to update our key pair to use the key pair that we have created. So copying it from the previous command and pasting it right here. Okay, so now let's run this command and hopefully everything will be verified. Okay, it says ready to deploy. That means everything is good. Awesome. Now finally, let's mint. Now for minting, we'll be using the minting website which Candy Machine provides, and we can read about it in the minting website section of the documentation. Here it refers to this directory here, which is where the Candy Machine UI exists. So we'll copy this command into our text editor here, and we'll navigate to that directory. But before we do that, we have to change the home directory to our current directory, and we'll prepend cd as the command because that's how you change directories. So copying that command, going to our PowerShell and pasting it in there. And we can see now we are in the Candy Machine UI directory. Let's open it in the File Explorer as well, just so that we have another visual reference. That's inside packages, Candy Machine UI, and this is where we are. The next step is to make a copy of this .env.example, and for that we'll run this command, which is cp.m.example, and we'll copy it into another file called .env. So let's run this command now. Okay, and we can see we have a new file called .env here. So let's open this up, and this requires our Candy Machine over here. And we made a note of that Candy Machine ID right here. So let's copy this and paste it into our .env file and save it. Now going back to the documentation, I think this is where it talks about updating the env file with the Candy Machine ID. Scrolling forward, next step is to install the dependencies. We did this previously for Metaplex. Now we have to do this for our Candy Machine UI package as well. Let me make a note of this command. Fortunately, we don't have to make any changes to the command, and we can just run it in our PowerShell. Again, this will take some time. Okay, so now our dependencies are installed, and the next step is to run yarn start. Let's copy this command, make a note of it, and let's run this command in our PowerShell. Okay, so after a lot of tries, I finally have the Candy Machine UI here. My virtual machine is very slow right now. But anyhow, I have Phantom Wallet installed here, and I'm already on the DevNet network. You can change that in your Phantom Wallet settings. And right now we have 0 Solana, so let's go to Sol Faucet and get some Solana first. So I just copied the public key of the wallet, and now we'll go to Sol Faucet, and we'll put our Solana wallet address here and request for 1 Sol on DevNet. Hopefully our wallet is funded. Let's just double check that. And here we can see we have 1 Solana. So let's go back to the Candy Machine UI now and connect our wallet. Choose Phantom and then hit connect. Okay, and we can see now we have 2 NFTs which we can mint at the price of 0.1 Sol. So let's try to mint something. Okay, mint was successful. Let's go to our wallet and look at our minted NFT now. And we can see that here is our NFT that we just minted. Let's try to mint the second NFT that we have here that's remaining. Okay, looks like this one got minted as well. Let's go back to our wallet. And while it's loading, we notice that there is no more NFTs remaining to be minted and that our mint is complete. And here we can see we have 2 NFTs now. We go in there, we have NFT 1 and NFT 2. Well, that wasn't bad at all. And everything works on Windows. If you still face any problems, please post it in comments and I'll try my best to help you out. Okay, so that's all I had for this video. I hope our Windows developers can now launch their NFT collection using Windows on Solana. I hope you liked the video, so please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to my channel and my Twitter account. And the next video will be coming out soon. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day, everyone.